Kia ora, talofa, namaste, haere and welcome to The Niche Cast. We're from thenichecache.com, where we go deep into Aotearoa sporting matters. We love Aotearoa, we love Aotearoa sport, and that's all we're here to do, just talk our way through some of the best and worst New Zealand sporting action of the weekend and the past week or so. Obviously, this includes the Blackcaps being swept.
Do we have to?
Well, I've got some. I want to get your feedback on some of my nuggets that I've got here, and then because the Blackcaps suck, we will discuss them later in the podcast. They don't deserve to be in the first half of the podcast, but I do have a couple of nuggets that I want to get your feedback on. Primarily, I want you to choose your favorite nugget. There's a lot of nuggets floating on the periphery, just kind of random nuggets that I thought were notable, but they didn't quite make the cut. Tom Latham, Tim Southey being notably worse as captains. We've got one Blackcaps batter with a strike rate over 80 and no Blackcaps bowlers with an RPO below 4 up against England, who had 5 batters with a strike rate over 80, 3 of which were over 90, and 4 bowlers below 4 RPO. We've got the nugget that the Blackcaps went to Sri Lanka, lost the first test, selected the same team, lost the second test. Then they host England, they lose the first test, they select the same team, they lose the second test. So we genuinely have the definition of insanity that everyone loves to throw up, where you do the same thing, you get the same result, honkadory. There's a lot of those type of nuggets floating around in my noggin. But I got 3 here. First of which, 4 consecutive home losses in a row. Which apparently the only time this has happened previously was in 1995 and 1996. So the Blackcaps are historically bad in New Zealand.
Wait, 1955-56 was the stat A.
Yes, 1955-56,
Yeah.
1995.
Which is quite a lot earlier.
Although,
I mean, it was bad. It would have been bad enough if it was in 96, but the fact it was 1956 is jeepers, you know? I mean, that's around about the time when the Blackcaps won their first ever test match, was like mid-50s. So that's the scope we're dealing with. In fact, that might have even, I don't know what the tests were there, but that might even include the 26 all-out world record test within that scope, because that was around the same time as well.
The second of my holy trinity of Blackcaps terrible cricket. They are 1-6 against Bazball England. But out of respect to England, out of respect to Brendan McCullum, I'm going to say it as the Blackcaps are 1-6 against Brendan McCullum's England Test cricket team. The final nugget of the holy trinity of terrible Blackcaps cricket is the fact that William O'Rourke faced more deliveries than Devon Conway in this test series. William O'Rourke faced 82 deliveries, 2 not outs, and Devon Conway faced 66 deliveries. Which of those 3 holy trinity nuggets of Blackcaps terrible cricket tickle your fancy?
My fancy, I don't think gets tickled by any of them, but my intrigue is tickled by all of them. And the worst of them has got to be the first one, is losing 4 test matches at home in a row for the first time since before they'd ever won a test match, or there or thereabouts, is absolutely crazy. That they're like, we've gone through some muddy eras of Blackcaps cricket in the past. We've gone through some great eras of Blackcaps cricket in the past. wouldn't have thought this team was capable of being there. And admittedly, like they've two of those games were against Australia, two of them were against a pretty good England team that seems to travel quite well, and for whatever reason, just well, actually, there's a bit in common between those teams. So I would suggest, in that both of those teams are quite assertive and have come to New Zealand and not tried to play New Zealand cricket against New Zealand. They've come to New Zealand and tried to play combative, aggressive, front foot kind of cricket, and to which the Blackcaps, on all four occasions, have kind of wilted. And they've been turning points in all of those games, as there are in every Test match, where it's like, here's a moment. Are you going to take this moment? Are you going to grind through and avoid losing a couple wickets on the end of the day or whatever, as we saw in the Blackcaps' first innings in the second Test, where they go from like, if Williamson and Ravindra are still there at the end of that day, they're in a fine position. Instead, not only do Ravindra and Williamson get out, but also Daryl Mitchell gets out, and then you got a night watchman and Tom Blundell, and the next day those guys get skittled out nice and quickly. Well, O'Rourke is the night watchman, though, by the way. Speaking of him being able to, carry a bat a lot better than initial reputation seems to suggest, he's getting night watchman duties ahead of all the other fellas. So there's another nice little nod for... we're going deep down into the thing to find nice little nods in there, but that's one of them for Will O'Rourke's batting. You wouldn't have picked Devon Conway to be the night watchman in that situation where he's still available in the order. But yeah, madness. They've lost four tests in a row. Like, even if you're against better teams, at some point you think in a home conditions, you'd at least grind out a draw. You'd at least scrape something through in there. But yeah, the fact they've just done something that they haven't done for 68 years, that's nugget numero uno.
For someone who was pushing to push the Blackcaps to the back end of the podcast because you didn't really want to talk too much about them, you did drop some emotions there. So that was... I
got like more where that came from. That's why I wanted to push him back. I'm trying to protect myself.
Seems like you're fired up about the Blackcaps. The 4 consecutive home defeats was brewing because, as I've said before, the Blackcaps have lost a home test in 3 consecutive summers before we get to the 4 consecutive home losses of 2024. My favorite nugget, though, is Will O'Rourke facing more deliveries than Devon Conway, because it sums everything up. Devon Conway, he was once good, now he's kind of shit. There's a couple of other lads in this Blackcaps team who were once good, who are now shit. Will O'Rourke, like Nathan Smith, like a bit of Glenn Phillips, less so Rachin Ravindra because he actually struggled so far in the series, but specifically Will O'Rourke and Nathan Smith, they were like kind of the only Blackcaps to show some ticker. Obviously, Tom Blundell had a century. That was nice. Maybe a bit too little, a bit too late, if we're being a bit honest about it. But the youngsters are the dudes showing the ticker. The youngsters are the dudes who look comfortable in Test cricket, and that is still my favourite thing about Blackcaps Test cricket right now. And that was summed up in Will O'Rourke facing 82 deliveries, while Devon Conway could only muster 66 deliveries. So shout out to the Blackcaps for just kind of being bad, and it's congratulations to them. Now it sets up a very awkward test in Hamilton where Tim Southee is guaranteed to play, even though he kind of sucks. Righto, the Niche Cast. If you enjoy Aotearoa Sports, we go deep on the website. We've got fresh yarns, obviously going deep into the Blackcaps. We also got your breakdown of the Auckland Derby, Auckland FC winning against Wellington Phoenix. That's live on our website. And of course, yesterday was newsletter day via Substack, thenichecache.substack.com. Lots of Kiwi sporting bits and bobs there, many of which form our podcast chat. And it's always a good place to get facts, figures, and information that the Niche Cache, me and you and I, care about. And it's strictly Aotearoa sport. There's nothing else. Like, we don't care about giving you opinions about anything else around the world. We're just here to broadcast Aotearoa sporting excellence, and you can check in with our newsletter, which is published for free every Monday and Friday. There are avenues to support the Niche Cache. donate to the Niche Cache. And if you join the Patreon whānau, which is a couple of dollars a month, you get access to our bonus podcast every Thursday. And you can also upgrade your Substack subscription, which is completely free for the newsletter. You can upgrade to a paid Substack subscription, and the bonus podcast also goes to you there. We will see what we're going to talk about. We'll leave some notes and touch on any bits and pieces that we are going to discuss on Thursday in our bonus podcast as we roll through this monster niche cast. And of course, you can make a one-off donation through Buy Me a Coffee if that's your buzz as well. Shout out to anyone who is part of the Patreon whānau. Shout out to the folks with a paid Substack subscription, and shout out to anyone who's bought us a coffee, because it goes hard and it's greatly appreciated. But of course, those things cost money, and you might not be able to donate to the Niche Cache. So that's all good. Your presence here with us in the audio platforms and on YouTube is greatly appreciated. Make sure you subscribe to the Niche Cache. Make sure you're liking the video. And if you got a nifty comment, leave it on YouTube. Otherwise, the doors of communication are always wide open on Patreon. So that's a benefit of being on Patreon, is we're right there for you and your Aotearoa sporting needs. And that's everything the Niche Cache does. Lots of deep dives on our website. Newsletter coming at you every Monday and Friday. Bonus podcast on Thursday for the generous folks funding our mahi. And of course, we drop the big old podcast on a Tuesday afternoon. We got some mindfulness, but I do want to hijack you a little bit of mindfulness because, and I'm always like, I want to hijack it, but then I want to hear what you say because I'm a bit insecure about my mindfulness. But the from the good folks who brought you Work Hard, Study Well, Sleep, Eat Plenty, whatever it was, from the God Fahim a few weeks ago, I bring you Boldy James, good old rapper, hip-hopper, Boldy James. He said, change is only good if it's for the greater good of the neighborhood. Which I thought really hit home, because then you're like, yeah, change is a constant. Yeah, change for you might be great, but it's only good if it's for the greater good of the neighborhood. So it's only good if it's for the good of all of us. And I thought that was pretty interesting. Not quite sure what it really meant, but not only does it sound good, it was from an interview. It wasn't from a song, so that it rhymes, but that's not the point.
Yeah, I was going to say, he got the bars out even still.
Yeah, but it's like the greater good of the neighborhood, like the community, like, yes, you're changing, but is that helping everyone around you? I thought that was quite interesting and something that I meditated upon leading into this podcast. Maybe you've got a better mindfulness, though.
Well, that's a pretty good one. I mean, you've got a couple elements to that, right? You got the constancy of change, but there's also is kind of saying change for the sake of change isn't necessarily the point. You need intentional change, or at least with the changes that you can control, because most of them we can't control, we can't deal with that. But then also that's when you're talking about not being able to control stuff, you're talking like that quote is telling you to get out of your own focus as well. It's telling you to focus on those around you and the sort of greater community. So there's good stuff there. The one I had prepared was from my boy Ramdas, because I forgot to do mindfulness at first because I was cramming through Flying Kiwis, because I'm changing the thing. I'm not doing National League on Mondays now because National League's finished. So I'm trying to move the Flying Kiwis back to a Tuesday spotlight. So I was working hard on that before, and then I was like, oh damn, we're about to do a podcast. I forgot to do mindfulness. So I've got to whip up something nice and quick. So I'll go to the tried and true with my boy Ramdas, and I did find a good one. I always find a good one with Ramdas, but this goes, the next message you need is always right where you are. You don't have to go looking for it. It's there. Just open your eyes, or be aware of your surroundings. Be alert. Be mindful.
Aware. Be aware. It is important, because quite often, regardless of whether you're talking to the old mate God, or you're just out there looking at the stars and you're like, please give me the guidance. Wish upon the stars like God, show me the way. That was from Omen, I think. Shut up. Damn, that just sparked a rabbit hole in my brain. Good songs. With you, like, you're always, not you, but I quite often find myself looking for guidance. You know, but you always, please give me a sign. Please give me the guidance. But I think it's kind of like, if you just like slow down, you're aware of the intention that you might be looking for some guidance, looking for some signs, as trivial as that might sound to some people. But if you slow down, if you're aware of your thoughts and if you're aware of what's around you, the guidance comes to you. So as opposed to like looking to the stars, looking to your whatevers, to your old mates, Uncle God, whatever it is, the Buddha, Ram Dass, whatever figure you're looking at, maybe just look within, because the God is within, right? So if you're asking yourself, please give me a sign, that intention, then you get into the awareness, then you get into slowing down and tapping into the world around you. That's where the signs and guidance comes from.
Yeah, well, one of Ram Dass's famous quotes is that you should treat everybody else that you meet as though they are God in drag. So, you know, if humans, but I guess also life force just in general, or you know, all of creation / existence, however you want to phrase that, is kind of an expression of God in disguise. So, you know, I think when people go consciously, there's a bit of crossover there as well, then, isn't there, between like intentional change and whatever, and here where you go consciously looking for guidance. A lot of that is sort of like, I don't know. I find when people do that a lot of the time, it's sort of like trying to find the cheat code. It's like, give me the answer to the test kind of thing, you know, is without working for it. And often I suspect that the guidance that does come, because the guidance is always there one way or another. It's these people might be looking for a shortcut to get to the finish line, but often I suspect it comes in a different form. Like, it's not, if you're looking for the answers to the test, they're not just going to give you the answers to the test. You're going to get like some kind of I don't know, if you, so some kind of clue on how to figure it out for yourself or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to be something where it's like the directions are right. You look up in the stars and then you can suddenly you see that there's a word written there or something. It's not going to be something simple like that. It's going to be something where like something more abstract, something more open to interpretation. But because it's open to interpretation, it's open to your interpretation, which means it's open to your experience, your pathway, your whatever it takes, or whatever filters you apply to things, just for the filters we can't avoid, the filters that we have to, because everything we perceive is perceived through our senses, right? So I think that's kind of I don't know, that rings out to me on that idea, is like the guidance that you get, the message that you get is, it's there, it's right there, but maybe it's not necessarily going to take the form of a message. You know, it's not going to be a letter with your name written on it.
We're going to roll through some rugby league and basketball and then get into football, and we'll finish with the cricket. But I want to start with some rugby league, because we've got a lot of rugby league stuff floating around. Most recently, because this morning I found out that Lennix Tovo is on a train and trial deal with the Rabbitohs. And Lennix Tovo is from Levin. And the storyline of Lennix Tovo as a emerging possible NRL player is that he was playing like Premier Rugby Union in Levin for Levin College Old Boys, I believe. And then he moved to Australia. He was playing rugby union in Canberra. And then he started playing Queensland Cup last year for Townsville. And the Townsville Blackhawks do have a connection to the Rabbitohs in the NRL. And Lennix Tovo, playing for the Townsville Blackhawks, Round 5, he was a replacement player. Round 6, he played 10 minutes off the bench. Round 9, starting fullback, 80 minutes. Round 10, starting fullback, 80 minutes. Round 11, starting fullback, 80 minutes. You catch my drift. He's playing most of the back end of the season as starting fullback and 80 minutes. He's kicking goals. He's playing 13 games, 7 tries, 6 try assists, 137 meters per game, 78% tackle efficiency. He's got tackle bus in basically every game he started at fullback, including 10 tackle bus in his first start at fullback, and a bunch of games with at least 4 tackle bus at fullback for the Townsville Blackhawks. Now he's on a training trial deal with the Rabbitohs, and that was an oversight on my behalf when I was doing the Kiwi-NRL summer guide on the weekend about the Knights, Sea Eagles, Rabbitohs and Roosters, which is live. We got 2 Kiwi-NRL summer guides live on the website right now that you can check in with for the fringe NRL lads, and I had to update it with Lennix Tovo from the Horowhenua region, and it's pretty interesting when you consider that in 2021, he was being basically celebrated as a 22-year-old impressing for Levin College Old Boys Rugby Union. Here we are in 2024, and he's got a training trial deal with the Rabbitohs. That's how quickly the Kiwi NRL journeys can spark up, and it's only a training trial deal with the Rabbitohs, so who knows how that progresses, but it will be interesting to see how he develops he played fullback for Townsville, and we'll see if maybe he just develops into a solid depth outside back there for the Rabbitohs. Rabbitohs also have Salesi Ata Otahuhu Jr., also got Nazareth Tawa Maris Jr., who's a forward from Auckland. Just touching on the Kiwi-NRL summer guides, the Knights have a massive crew. They are deep with Kiwi-NRL players. Too many to mention here. You've got Sea Eagles. You've got Oliver Lowry from West Coast and Christchurch. You've got Devonte Mihanui, Glenora Jr. He's on the fringe of the Sea Eagles squad. Roosters, we've talked about their diminished crew. And the next wave of Kiwi-NRL summer guides that I've got are Panthers, Eels, Tigers, Bulldogs. See what I'm doing here? We're going Queensland, then we're going Eastern Coast, then we're going inland, then we'll finish with Sharks, Dragons, Raiders, Storm. So the next wave, Bulldogs, Sasai Alatini from Christchurch. He's got a supplementary development contract. Cassius Tia and Alekola Simi Jones, they have train and trial contracts. The Tigers have Ruben Porter on a supplementary contract. Eden Ackland on a train and trial contract. Eels only really have Te Huranui Twiddle from Turanga Waiwai. He's on a train and trial contract, but I think it's his second summer training with the Eels NRL squad. And the Panthers have Preston Ricky in their top 30. They've got Austin Diaz on a train and trial contract, and also I was just learning about David Fale, who I think is a Maris Jr. I believe he's on a train and trial contract with the Panthers as well. The other thing I was thinking about with the Rugby League was some Warriors storylines, and I wrote these storylines in our newsletter yesterday, and I'll be fleshing them out for a big yarn on the website. So again, that's why you should be signed up to the newsletter, because you're getting all the stuff before we actually roll it out in a podcast or a deep dive on the website. So a couple of these storylines, you got the young wave, Leotawa, Graham Taufa, Vaimunga. That's Dimitrik Vaimunga, who's now gone as who has changed from Sifakula to Vaimunga by the looks of it. Jacob Laban, Lekala Sema, Zion Mai'uu. Like, what does the young wave do this season, next season? We've got the web of Shans Nickel Krookstar, Roger Tuivasa-Sheck, and Taintua Piki, all intertwined, all caught together. What positions do they play? What roles do they have? I think all three should be in the top 17. Obviously, Nickel Crockstar should. Obviously, Tuivasa-Sheck should. I'm a big fan of Taintua-Piki. I think he should be there as well. How do you get them all in? Tuivasa-Sheck, 8 out of 10 in all backline positions. We saw Nickel Crockstar show a bit of razzle-dazzle in the Pacific Championship, so maybe he can do a different role. Maybe he can actually pass the ball as a fullback, add some spice out there. But that's why I like Taintua-Piki at fullback, because he's fast, he's strong, he rips in, but he's got a good skill profile. The Andrew Webster playing style. And I'm curious if we can flow this into the Chiefy playing style updates with the Wellington Phoenix, because we've basically had 2 years of Andrew Webster coaching the Warriors, and both years have been the same. Like, I don't think the Warriors football is very individual centric. That's why I don't really care about Shaun Johnson, because it was all about the system. In Andrew Webster's first year, the system was working well. All the pieces were on time. All the decoy runs were there. Everyone was passing accurately, shifting the ball, manipulating space. The Andrew Webster playing style worked. The defensive structure worked. Last season, it didn't really work. So what does Andrew Webster do with his style of Warriors football? Rugby league football, that is. Another storyline, Tohu Harris. Like, what's Tohu Harris up to? Is he going to play much? Is he Kawhi Leonard? Like, what's Tohu Harris actually doing as an NRL player? And I was surprised to see that Tohu Harris played 14 games last year, which was far less than 23 games in 2023, but it was right on track with 15 games in 2022, 15 games in 2021. Also, Tohu Harris, 95.3% tackling last year. That's the same as pretty much every year before that. 132 meters. Sure, a few meters less than 139 last year, but pretty much in line with 131 in 2022. I have no idea what to expect from Tohu Harris. So obviously it's an interesting storyline. And then we get to something that I literally just kind of alluded to. Shaun Johnson averaged 476 kicking meters per game last year, which was the third highest average per game. Addin Fonua-Blake averaged 73.17 post-contact meters per game, which was the highest in the NRL. For context, 4 players averaged 70 post-contact meters or more per game. Fonua-Blake was the highest. What do we have? We got 5 players averaging over 450 kicking meters per game. Shaun Johnson was third. And the Warriors sucked. So, is Fonua-Blake's post-contact meters and Shaun Johnson's kicking meters, are they important? Because as individual stats, they are phenomenal stats, but I don't think they were conducive with the Warriors winning games of rugby league. Maybe I'm wrong. And if I'm wrong, who eats up the post-contact meters? Who's going to be doing 476 kicking meters per game? Do you need to do 476 kicking meters per game? Because Nathan Cleary averaged 360 kicking meters per game. And also, why is there so many kicking meters if the Warriors have the leading post-contact meter eater? Like, they're getting down the field, but then they're also doing the most kicking meters. Like, it just doesn't really make sense. It confuses me. That's why it's an interesting storyline. But I'm curious, how do you interpret specifically the post-contact meter and kicking meters? Like, do you have any assistance for me in processing those stat nuggets?
Well, I was thinking the same thing that you were just saying. It's like it doesn't seem like those two things should be aligned. You know, it seems like you should have a guy dude with big kicking meters or a guy with big post contact meters, because both of those things are the same in terms of a rugby league game. Like, we're not talking about points or anything like that. We're talking about yardage. Like this is how you get your team up the field. And one of them is with the ball, one of them is without the ball because you're kicking it to the other team. If you're kicking it deep, you're kicking it to the other team. Those are nice hacking kicks that Shaun Johnson's was putting in there. Those are like kick for territory stuff, and I think it was a bit of a remember that being a little bit of a talking point is why isn't he putting up more contestable kicks? Like, well, the reason is because this is how they play. They're trying to pin the other team down and then play off the back of that. So I don't know, like, because a lot of that stuff, if you're getting yardage, you should be doing well in the arm wrestle, and the Warriors didn't seem to have that. But I mean, it's also the case where like a lot of good stats like that are just undone if you make errors and if you give away penalties. So maybe I don't know what the Warriors numbers were like that, but so when they play well, they seem like a team that does have a very, very high completion rate because they are a bit more of a safer team than certain others. They don't necessarily take as many risks. I guess it's just part of being what you're saying about being a system kind of team is you have a way of playing. And yeah, I don't know how that stuff tracks out. It's also the case that we're talking about two players, so it might well be that Fonua-Blake's getting 1 million post-contact meters, but no one else is really doing much alongside. I don't know. And I know that, like, I don't know what the case is there with Fonua-Blake and other players getting post-contact meters, but I do know that the kicking meters, Shaun Johnson has heaps because he did all the kicking. Like he was taking the overwhelming bulk of kicks in games that he played because he did miss a lot of games. And if that's the case, well, that's also a little bit of being quite predictable. And if you know there's one guy who's going to do the kick and every time you can put a little bit more pressure on him, load up on that fella, as they say. But yeah, it's these are definitely. It's not just that we need probably more like let's see what we see in the first few weeks of next season and then be able to compare that and see how things evolve. It's not just that. It's I think these kind of elements of sports and stats and whatever are just always evolving, always in flux. So what those numbers mean one season and 2 years time, they might mean something else. Like they might have been extremely important one time, they might become less important if the game evolves in certain ways. So I think a position of flexibility on those kind of ideas is always important.
Big week for the Breakers. They had a loss on Thursday night, 97-70, and then they had a loss to Sydney Kings on Saturday night, 98-83. The Breakers are now 7-7, fifth on the ladder. But we've got Melbourne United who are first, and Melbourne United have the big dog Rob Loe. They've got another big dog in Shea, and they got the youngster on the rise, Flynn Cameron. And I was also curious, I'm not sure about the Illawarra Sydney. Sydney have Isaiah Liafa off the top of my head, but then we've got Perth who are now fourth on the ladder. They've got Hiram Harris, Ty Webster, and Dante Russo-Nance. So there's plenty of Kiwis that are perking up my antenna in the NBL, overlapping with the Breakers' struggles.
Yeah, no Kiwis on the Illawarra Hawks. They're actually the only team in the NBL this season that don't have a New Zealander at all. So, like, not even a DP. Everybody else has at least one Kiwi. But the two teams that have the most, we're excluding the Breakers, who, well, if you exclude the Breakers from this conversation anyway when it comes to signing Kiwi players, but also because they're the New Zealand team, you expect that even though they are lower, they do have guys like Max Darling and their what do you call them? Their development players build them up a fair bit here. But looking at the Aussie teams, Melbourne United have the three you mentioned, Perth Wildcats have the three you mentioned. Both of those are top four teams. So, there's indisputable evidence right there. But Melbourne have been in superb form. They actually just lost on the Sunday, I think it was. They were beaten by Brisbane Bullets, who scored 122 points against Melbourne United, which is crazy enough. They also had 4 different players scoring at least 25 individually within those 122 points. And one of them, of course, was Tyrell Harrison, who's having another spectacular season for the Bullets. Little bit of a slow start, but he's really getting into his grind now as just a especially as a scorer. Like he's shown that he's one of the best rebounders in the league in the past, but this year he's really starting to. This is not his first 20-point game. He's had a few big ones like that. But also another big man who's been scoring plenty of points lately is none other than Rob Loe, who where are we here? He in his first 11 games he had for Melbourne United, he had 2 instances where he scored double digits. He has scored double digits in 6 consecutive games since then, including a 30-pointer, not this time against Brisbane, but the previous time that they played Brisbane about a month ago, in which he hit 6 of 8 3-pointers. So he actually started pretty poorly with his long-range shooting, Rob Loe, which is part of why he wasn't scoring that much, but he's really turned that around lately. He's hit a 3-pointer in each of those 6 games, which he's scored double figures. That also includes a 25-pointer against the Breakers, at the start of this past round. 25 points, 3 rebounds, 3 assists. He has at least 3 rebounds in all of these games in which he's scored double digits. And yeah, he didn't. Even though they did lose, he was still pretty effective against the Bullets in that defeat. So he scored 19 points there with 6 rebounds and 4 assists, which is great Rob Loe stuff. Like he's shooting from range, he's getting assists, he's getting rebounds, he's influencing the game in a bunch of ways. He's a pretty good defender as well, especially when he's in his spots where he likes to be. And that had helped Melbourne United to a 5-game winning streak, which sent them up to the top of the table, including that dismantling of the Breakers. But yeah, they did lose most recently to the Brisbane Bullets, so there was the streak is over. But I don't think the form is over. We're getting back towards Melbourne United being, as they have been for the last several years, one of the very best teams through the regular season, because they didn't quite translate that into playoff stuff last year. But I guess that's the motivation this time around. And yeah, to see Rob Loe sparking things up lately, as he has done, a fella who was retired not so long ago, and more than once as well, is beautiful to see. He's really, well, I mean, I would say he's found a great role with Melbourne. He's found a great fit, but he knew there was a great role. He knew there was a great fit. That's why he came out of retirement to play for them.
I do remember poking fun at you for your appreciation for Rob Loe, but now it's coming
Sacrilege.
Now the big man is doing some good stuff. He's averaging 18.3 minutes per game this season, and the last time he averaged 18 points or 18 minutes per game or more was 2019-20, and he's also averaging 10.9 points per game, which seems to be a career high for Rob Loe. So he's doing great stuff.
And as I say, the minutes per game and the points per game are going up at the moment as well, with the way he's been tracking, coinciding with Melbourne United winning a lot of games lately.
Melbourne United also have Shea, and Shea, he's got 4.9 assists per game this season, which also seems to be a career high for Shea. So shout out to him, averaging 23 minutes per game. He's been over 20 minutes per game for the last 4 seasons. Then we go Flynn Cameron, who has jumped up from 9.4 minutes per game to 15.1 minutes per game. Playing more minutes means more mahi. So shout out to Flynn Cameron, making good progress with the best NBL team. Also,
more minutes does mean more mahi, but also like checking out where have I got here? His field goal percentages have stayed pretty steady. So that's compared to where he was last year. He also, I think he's missed 1 free throw this season. I haven't got here's the totals. He is 23 of 24 from the free throw line. So there's that. That's pretty superb. But the fact, you often see players who get that big boost in minutes with sort of second, third year as they grow into their careers and earn that. But then can you stay as consistent as when he was playing, what was it like? Have you got what he was playing last year? About 10 minutes per game, I think it was.
9.4.
Yeah, 9.4. With only 1 start, he's already made 3 starts this year. A lot of that is going to be sort of garbage timey minutes, and he's going to be playing against bench units and stuff like that. This year, for him to be keeping his shooting tallies and stuff consistent, he's still hitting Jesus, 43.9% from the field and 41.4% from beyond 3-point line, which is amazing. He was also with Taranaki last year. He was 42% shooter from deep, so he's just an incredible 3-point shooter, quite clearly. But yeah, for him to keep that, like, as he's gotten more minutes, as he's gotten more opportunity, given a bit more license within Melbourne United's team, for him to stay consistent is also a sign of him actually getting a lot better as well. Like, that's to keep that thing steady, show against in tougher situations is great stuff from him. He is definitely having a breakout season. And I was looking at Shea's numbers before as well and saying, like, his minutes are slightly down on last year. That's a little bit more pick and choose. I think that'll be different in sort of as the season gets further along and they need his defensive player of the year capabilities a little bit more. That'll probably ramp up a little bit, but like his points are slightly down because his field goal attempts are slightly down, but everything else has improved from last year to this season. And last year he was awesome. Last year he was the defensive player of the year. His assists have gone way up, as you say. His field goal percentages, his 3-point shooting, his free throw shooting, and his free throw attempts per game, those have all gone up. His rebounds have gone up, largely due to his offensive rebound. His steals have gone up. His turnovers and fouls have gone down, which is the equivalent of them going up because those are things you want fewer of. So yeah, pretty impressive stuff across the board from all three of the Kiwis at Melbourne United, who are very much a part of a team that is finding some quality form right now.
Perth have Hiram Harris and Ty Webster holding steady, but I was curious to see Dante Russo-Nance has had a slight increase in his game time this season. He's only playing 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 9 minutes, but he is playing a little bit more for Perth. So he was a highly decorated, high pedigree youngster coming out of Aotearoa basketball. Signed a development type of contract with Perth a few seasons ago. So it's good to see Dante Russo-Nance building with Perth. Do you have any quick Perth thoughts off the top of your dome?
Perth are also very good, but they are a little bit less good because of the Kiwi lads. Like Hiram Harris, I wish they'd play him a lot more than they do. He's still got an important role within there, but he's not sort of like he's not. You remember last year they had a poor start and then they elevated him to the starting lineup, and it was then that they started to turn things around a fair bit. They've not quite done, like, we haven't quite had the Hiram Harris moments or spotlight in the same way this year. Ty Webster's had some games for sure. He's an outstanding player, and he's gotten a few of those for sure. Like, but at the same time, he's not necessarily that's very much Bryce Cotton's team, and Ty Webster is fitting in around that a little bit more. But as I say, he's had some good performances within there, and it is cool to see Dante Russo-Nance getting. It's not a lot of minutes, but he's getting some minutes, and he hardly played it all last season. He was very much a development emphasis rather than the player emphasis of development player. This year, he's starting to step up a little bit. They did renegotiate his contract in the offseason. He was supposed to be moving up to a full-time roster status in the second year, but they decided, because like maybe they just think he needs another year as a DP in order for his progression, sure. But also it was also a roster thing of how do we fit some more players, and we need to clear a spot to sign someone else. So we'll keep this guy around as a DP rather than elevating him and then elevate him hopefully next year. I assume that's what the renegotiation was. We'll just kick this can down the road for 12 months and then come back around to it. But yeah, he's super young as well, so he's ahead of schedule by far. There's no one younger than him as New Zealanders in the Aussie NBL this season. There's no one younger than him, so good stuff from him as well. He's starting to get spotted just a little bit more.
Have you had a chance to catch up on the Wellington Phoenix women and their victory over the Brisbane Roar?
I'm about halfway through it. Obviously know how it went, but I've been caught the highlights and caught the first half replay. I want to watch this. I'll finish the second half after we do this as well, so I'm up on it. But yeah, I think I got enough to get an understanding, and see what
I don't care about your understanding. I'm just going to tell you that the Brisbane Roar
Good, that's good. I'll understand what you
were
say.
were dirty, and it was kind of it fired me up watching it, but it was kind of disgusting to watch the Brisbane Roar and their antics. Like they were playing rugby, and it was like like there's certain derby football rules that apply, and I've like as someone on the outside looking in of football, there's like the two derbies that I've seen have been very physical games of football. But it was fascinating to watch Brisbane Roar just be blatantly dirty, and to like be honest, take advantage of a referee who looked completely out of her depth, and linos who looked completely out of their depth. Like they weren't doing anything either. Like it was a very interesting game to observe, and of course the Wellington Phoenix won, which made it pretty entertaining. And I bring this up kind of because I think there are similarities in how the Wellington Phoenix women and men play. Maybe just the vibe of the organization, which is not negative. It's just where they're at right now, because like the Wellington Phoenix women team and the glorious folks at Porirua Park, they didn't really fire up when Brisbane Roar were doing all their rugby tackles and tackling players off the ball. Like they went quiet, and the team kind of backed off, and they became like just a bit passive. They did win the game, they enjoyed the last 10 minutes, like for sure. Once you score the second goal, and then you're up 2-1, and Brisbane Roar just looked pretty crap. So you kind of get the sense that you're going to win. Then the fans and the players, they're piping up. They're looking a lot more confident. But it was an interesting display because like I haven't seen an opposition team, primarily Auckland FC, be dirty in any way against Wellington Phoenix men. But I've seen Auckland FC be very physical and just more growing up than the Wellington Phoenix in those two derby games. And it was something that I observed against the Brisbane Roar on the women's side that I just thought was interesting. I don't think it means anything other than a very good victory for the Wellington Phoenix women, because they were battling adversity. They were battling, like obviously they're from Wellington, so they know all about the breeze. They were battling conditions. They were battling a terrible referee. They were battling a dirty team that is apparently better than them, ranked third on the ladder. Wellington Phoenix women are now 8th on the ladder with 2 wins and 3 losses. But I just liked it. I liked the grit and fight of that Wellington Phoenix women's team after they were kind of pushed around for the majority of that game, which brings me to a couple of hard and fast observations about the derby. Do you have any thoughts on Jeff Wilson, New Zealand football guru, leading the coverage with the broadcaster?
Fewer thoughts than a lot of people seem to have, but one or two. I also like one or two thoughts on what you're saying about the physicality of Brisbane in that game. I thought from what I've seen, through the first half and a chunk of the second half, and did get into the second half there. Wanted to see Olivia Kelly get a debut as well at 1 at halftime in that game. That's a nice little element to the Phoenix women's season. Finally getting their last import in and on the pitch is a big deal, considering how only Longo scored the 2 goals, but one was set up by Olivia Ferguson with a nice little layoff. The other one was, but after Longo had pressed and won the ball. The other was set up by Maya McCutcheon, but it was like a square pass, and then Longo went and dribbled past a couple players and banged it in. Gently nudged it in at the near post.
I thought you were looking for the past tense, and I was going to say bunged it in.
Bunged it in. Banged is past tense, isn't it? Yeah. Well, anyway. So yeah, it's some nice stuff there when you see like their imports that they have got on board have been pretty influential. So having another one of them it sounds like a good thing. I'll see how much she gets into the physical stuff in the second half when I catch up to it. But definitely, Tiana Jaber was all over that in the first half. In many ways, I thought the Phoenix actually kind of set the tone. Like, I thought they came out quite physical. Yeah, Alyssa Whittam shoved a couple people over, and there's a few little not necessarily fouls, but like they just weren't backing down in challenges. And I got the feeling that Brisbane, who must be said were without two of their best players, because the Matildas have they for some reason they decided to cram two international windows into one international window, so they played 4 games in the time where you'd normally play two. But I mean, they have a big squad and a lot of A-League players, so Brisbane didn't have the best couple of players, and it felt like they kind of didn't react very well to that, which is an interesting point that I'll come around to because I agree entirely about what you said about Auckland FC. Sort of play quite grown man footy against Wellington Phoenix in the men's A-League in both of the derbies there. And I think the Phoenix's reaction to it in game 2 in particular was quite notable. But on Jeff Wilson, from what I gather, he was just like a late call-up. Whoever was supposed to be the main presenter just got sick. I can't remember who's been doing it. They had one of their like other Sky presenters from outside the football thing who's been doing the first couple of games, but I forget who. But sounds like Jeff Wilson was just the next man up, and I thought he did all right. I didn't get once or twice when he threw out a footballing opinion where I'm like, yeah. I don't know. You sound like you could be talking about any old sport, but I thought he did pretty well for a late minute call up, and he mostly just stuck to his role of be the guy that facilitates the conversation. So I thought it was all right.
So it wasn't a grand plan of Sky Sport to rugbyify, like, oh my God, we got a big sporting event. We need to make it rugby, and we're going to put Jeff Wilson into lead, because he did drop a few rugby references as well, which I'm sure the footballing community absolutely adored. The other good thing about
it was better him than John Kerwin. So even though John Kerwin does have a son who's an all-white, so he probably knows a fair bit about football. What we need is Jeff Wilson on the cricket coverage, because he was also a black cat.
Why are you throwing these ideas out there? Let's just stop, please. Although, now you fired me up. The segment, like, we're watching the cricket, and they go, like, the roving reporter type of thing.
Yes.
So, last year, a lovely chap, but the segment was consistently terrible, consistently awkward, cringy as anything can be, and that was reinforced by the fact that the dude from last summer is no longer doing it this summer, and they've got someone new to do it this summer who, respect to his whakapapa, he's a junior, so he's... so like, what, you're a junior, so that's weird. But segment is just as terrible, just as cringy, just as I need to change the channel regardless of whatever's on the channel that I'm changing it to, because I need to get away from this roving reporter segment. And the one time where I don't quite change the channel quick enough, the roving reporter segment is talking to Craig McMillan in the stands. So if you didn't get enough Craig McMillan in commentary, the roving reporter segment is a chat with Craig McMillan, which made me lose the plot, primarily because the Blackcaps suck, and I'm also having to deal with these incredibly cringy segments, most notably more Craig McMillan.
What a segment that was, eh? I'm still... I don't know if commentators wouldn't, because I've done a couple commentary things now in the last thing with New Zealand football, and it was like, I definitely found in the National League one where there were a couple of times where I said the same word 2 or 3 times, and I'm like, I got to not say that word again. That's too obvious. But Craig McMillan must hit double. He must hit triple figures for what a shot that is per game, and across the course of a test match.
Don't worry about his commentary. Like, respect, it's a hard job. We say the same shit even in the podcast, and as you said, you're a commentator now. I just don't need... Like, I can deal with whatever commentary you're doing, that's fine. I respect the role. But I don't need more outside the commentary. And I certainly don't
think they
need...
just ran out of ideas.
Well, that's the point. I don't need your roving reporter segment because we've had 2 summers now where it's just bad TV to the point where we've had 2 different dudes doing the same job because it's bad. Anyway, let's get back to football. So yeah, Jeff Wilson was doing the job. He was having a crack. That's fine. But the best thing about this derby was the entrances of the 2 teams. We had the Port arriving on the steps behind you there, and if you... I'm struggling to find any replays or anything like that because it was quite early in the pre-match. But the way they enter Mount Smart, the Temple of Mount Smart, the best rectangle stadium in Aotearoa, it was like, it gave me goosebumps watching the Port walk down the stairs, stop halfway on the stairs, you know, give their blessings to the Temple of Mount Smart, pay their respects, welcome to country ceremony. They arrive, it was beautiful. And then you also get the yellow fever. They've got a little clip here, fever tour.mp4, but it is David Tour. So it's fever tour David, TUA, which I thought was just a nifty bit of language. And they've got their own little vlog of the experience of going to Auckland and just seeing how they were entering the stadium and what they were up to as well. It's just a beautiful Aotearoa sporting spectacle. And I think we're all pretty lucky to have had 2 of them in the space of a couple of months. Obviously, Auckland FC are the big dogs of the A-League, not just the Derby, because they are 6-0 at the top of the ladder. This week, they are playing Melbourne City in Melbourne. Who are the Wellington Phoenix playing? They are at home with Macarthur FC. Quick ladder check. Melbourne City are 4th. Macarthur FC are 8th. Wellington Phoenix are now 5th on the ladder. Footballing matters. I felt like we didn't get enough G Philly for the Blackcaps in Wellington or at Hagley. I feel like we might have got a bit too much of T-Pain for the Wellington Phoenix in the derby. I was a little bit surprised to see T-Pain pushing up into the attacking areas as a, like, without the football, they were pushing like 4 dudes up the field. And T-Pain was suddenly like as a right winger. That was just a little bit like, I wasn't expecting that. And of course, I don't know much about football, so I'm prepared to ride that wave. Did you have any thoughts on why Tim Payne was pushing so far up the field? Because it did seem like the Wellington Phoenix... Wait, so that started with the lineups, the lineup graphic, and it had Sheridan as a striker. And I think Jacob Spoonley pointed out that was not how they would line up on the field. And then they came onto the field, and Sheridan was basically playing right back with T-Pain pushing right up into a right wing position, mainly without the football. But then when they were without the football, then Sam Sutton would just stay at left back. So it was kind of like, and we've talked about this, the Chiefy formation and style of play is very fluid, very changeable through the game with and without the football. But it was a bit of a shock to see early in that game the Wellington Phoenix pushing so many bodies forward in their press without the football. T-Pain's right up the field. Sam Sutton's kind of holding back on the left side. And I guess they were trying to limit I don't know. What was your interpretation of all of that?
Well, yeah, it does start with the lineups, which is a funky one because, the Wellington Phoenix have 8 players who have started every single game. And if Payne hadn't been injured last week, I think that would have been 9. Like they're very consistent in terms of the players that they've picked. Nathan Walker and Sam Sutton have sort of come in and out a little bit, largely because also Sutton's had 1 or 2 injuries. And obviously Paolo Retre's come into the side in place of Finn Conchi. It's more recently in the last few weeks, but generally speaking, very consistent lineup that they've been able to pick. And Auckland FC are the same. Auckland FC have 9 players who have started all of their, 6 games so far. 9 players have started every one. Brimmer and Howison have rotated a little bit, and Sakai missed a game last week. That's it. Other than that, same lineup. But despite the fact that both of these teams really consistent sides, I saw that Auckland FC lineup just on their Twitter graphic thing with all the, the boy band posters and all that. And I knew exactly what their formation was going to be. I know exactly how they're going to line up just by seeing their names. I see the Wellington Phoenix team sheet, and it's the same every week. I see the Wellington Phoenix list of names, and I'm like, I don't know how that's going to look. And then on the coverage, they show the graphic, and I'm like, well, I don't know how that's going to look, but I know it's not going to look like that. I don't know how that keeps happening. Like when because on the National League final, I like dictated the graphic thing, the formation graphic part. I'm like, yeah, put Luke Jorgensen there, put Monty Patterson at this spot kind of thing. And I think I got it right too. So I pat on the back for that, even though it's not that hard because I just watched the other games and knew where they were. I don't know who does that for the Wellington Phoenix games, but I think in the A-League you don't just, because we just got a team sheet that just had the names on the thing. It's like these are the lineups, figure it out kind of thing. I think in the A-League they get the team provide also not just the list of players, but I think they also provide a little graphic formation thing to the broadcasters. So I think that's how it works, and I suspect they just lie on them. And the Phoenix have a history of doing this for a while. Like they'll just put the wrong thing on there.
But the point is that no matter what they say, you don't know the formation. So even if Auckland FC are lying, you know the formation they will line up in.
Yeah, so if Auckland FC lied on the thing, we could figure it out. Phoenix do lie on the thing, and we still don't know. It's not like this says Sheridan's a striker, but we know he's going to be here kind of things. Like, well, no, we don't. Is he going to be right centre back? Is he going to be right fullback? He's played a game at right midfield. Like, we're not actually sure what they're going to do because Chiefy likes to keep a few tricks up his sleeve because he likes to have these he's even said like he doesn't really like the idea of summarizing tactics and formations because his team is quite fluid. They have a bunch of different looks how they're going to look throughout any given game, and we saw this in the derby even more, like quite substantially because Tim Payne is playing wing back, but a lot of the times Sam Sutton, who's the other wing back, is hanging deep in a 4, and Payne's pushing even further up to where he's almost like a winger. And then for a little spell in the second half, Tim Payne was practically playing as striker. I don't know if he was specifically as a striker, if he's just hanging out there, but it seemed like he was playing as a striker. And Kosta Barbarouses was drifting wide, and Hideki Ashige was drifting a little bit more wide. And I think Kazuki Nagasawa actually pushed up almost alongside Payne. So you had your midfielder and your right back playing as the 2 strikers, and your strikers out wide. It was very weird. I'd imagine that wasn't something that they were going to stick with permanently. I think that was just let's try this for 10 minutes, and then they subbed Tim Payne off and brought on Maka Rojas, and obviously went a little bit more closer to what plan A was going to be. But yeah, I can't figure out why they did that. My instinct is that I think Chiefy was maybe just overthinking things. Like, you got a lot of options, you got to pick something. Sometimes you just got too many options to pick, and you get in your own head a little bit about it.
I don't like you overthinking or whatever. He had a plan and he wanted to roll out his plan.
He had multiple plans.
But it was just it was just different, and that's all right. But I think ultimately, regardless of whatever tactics Chiefy wanted to do and execute, Auckland FC is the better team, and they've been the better team twice. And I don't think it's anything negative against the Phoenix, because again, in this derby, my takeaway was that Auckland FC is just more mature. They're more experienced in football, and they are better prepared for these situations. Unfortunately, one of the mishaps that happened for Wellington Phoenix was the bro Isaac Hughes' own goal, and that's like, it's like Uluwayemi's mishap in the first derby. These aren't situations where it's like, oh, you're inexperienced, or like Oluwayemi's not that inexperienced, but Hughes, like, it's not like, oh, you're in a tough situation in a derby, you're going to make a mistake, and that's it. It's just like these lapses in concentrations do happen for young players especially, and I think there's just more of those players in the Phoenix team, even when Verstraete is injured early in the game and doesn't play the rest of the game. But who's the player they bring on? Cam Howison, who has played a lot of football. Sure, he's not playing for Manchester City in the Champions League, but he has played in relatively big games year in, year out with Auckland City over the past 5 to 6 years. Like, he is ready for that moment, and he is just a good, mature footballer, let alone the rest of those dudes. Like, there's so much class. And I want to spend a little bit of time on Auckland FC because they deserve it before I get back to the Phoenix. Like, Sakai, like, every touch he does is just classy. Little shimmies, little fakes, but then the speed and the whip on his passes. We've talked about Nando last week, and he was back at his best. Like, I think the Nando passing avenue to Franny de Vries, I think T-Pain did shut off some of that, so I think that was part of the tactic, and that actually worked because Franny de Vries didn't get as much football. But then, come to think of it, it might be a bit of a football profit, because then with the Phoenix putting their 4 dudes up the field in the press, you don't have the layer behind. So Franny de Vries he might make that pass. Oh, Nando might make the pass to de Vries the first time, and then T-Pain pushes up a bit higher, a bit wider to shut off the pass, but there's all that space in behind. So then Nando can just do that pass in behind there, which did happen. And it was just, yeah, Louis Toomey, a bit of niggle. The youngsters, Gillian, Rogerson, they were impactful. And, well, even like the Auckland FC imports, like Galios, Mai, Sakai, the centre back, Day, fantastic. Like, all those dudes are very impressive, mature footballers. And then I look at the Wellington Phoenix, and once again, I'm thinking, who's the best player for the Wellington Phoenix? It's Kosta Barbarouses, who was leading the physicality and niggle because he was doing late tackles all over the show. Like, he might as well have been playing for the Brisbane Roar women's team with the way he was ripping into players with the ball. But then, like, his workload in defense, his work with the footy, especially, and this was another thing I was thinking about, because the Wellington Phoenix, when they have the ball, it's the same thing as last year, right? Where they spread it out. Like, even if it's just in their half, they spread it out, and then the ball gets to someone like Ben Old, he's in a one-on-one situation, and he has a lot of space to dribble. Now, if T-Pain's getting the ball in those situations, I don't think it's very effective. But if it's Costa, if it's a Shige, if it's Marco Rojas, then you're really starting to generate momentum for the Phoenix. But it's also, that's where you get into the big boy football versus the development style, because those one-on-one situations where you don't have anyone else within 10 meters of you, it's a one-on-one battle. Well, Sakai's bigger and stronger than you. He might just win that matchup. You know, those physical, mature players are better equipped to deal with that style of football from the Phoenix that we've now seen 2 seasons in a row, because that was the Ben Old profile, right? Like, that's what Ben Old made his big move to France all about, was getting the ball early in your own half and dribbling, which is something that Kosta Barbarouses does very well, something that Marco Rojas does very well. It's just a little bit harder when you're coming up against a grizzly, mature, experienced team like Auckland FC, who even if they get beaten, even if they lose that matchup, might just chop you down to stop you going forward.
Yeah, and especially grizzly and experienced in the back line, where even though you've got a couple guys in their mid-20s playing centre back, Nando Painika and Dan Hall, it's like Painika's played 30-odd international games.
Sorry, I said Day as Dan Hall.
close enough. And Dan Hall's won multiple A-League championships with Central Coast, and has played in Champions League type situations as well in Asia. So like these guys are experienced for their age, and they're also huge. Like they're big dudes. They're both of them stand like, I don't know, 1.90 odd sort of range. They're tall buggers and they're strong. And I suspect that's my best guess is why Tim Payne found himself in those areas in the early second half, is just because he might be the only one physically able to go up against those guys and take them out of their just out of their comfort zone a little bit. Because it certainly wasn't going to be Kosta. Kosta was having to get chippy because he's not about to shove them over. He's not going to run through those guys. And I thought, I did think Kosta had a great game. I also thought there's one example of what you're saying where the one-on-one battle went the way of the Wellington Phoenix over those Auckland FC defenders. One example of that, which is when he scored, and it was because he had a foot race against Tommy Smith. And there's a couple, that's a couple 34-year-olds running as fast as they can there. And Kosta ran a lot faster than Smithy. And that was the only thing. That was the only time where it looked like Auckland FC really got breached through something that wasn't like really excellent play or whatever.
Well, that came from a turnover. That was
it. Did Alex Rufus stepping up,
winning the ball in the midfield. Which is to my point. The Wellington Phoenix, when they have their system and their structure, like they almost did. They passed the ball up the right side of the field, cut it back. Someone had a shot in the box, but when they're working the ball out of defense, they just kind of get isolated. And sometimes that's really effective because you got so much space to dribble into. But a lot of the time you're isolated against a better defender. And yes, Kosta Barbarouses was faster than Tommy Smith, but he lost most of the matchups with not Mr. Day, someone I just randomly created, but Dan Hall. Like Dan Hall was dominating the matchup with Kosta Barbarouses time and time again.
Which he and Pinecker have done against everyone they've faced. Like Kosta Barbarouses is still the only player to have scored against Auckland FC. That's the first goal they've conceded, which, by the way, brings up a kind of crazy milestone for Kosta Barbarouses because he also scored his first goal against Western United earlier this season, just a couple of weeks ago. And because of that, because of the goal against Western, because of the goal against Auckland, he's the only, he has now scored against 15 unique A-League franchises. There have only been 16 unique A-League franchises. The only team he never scored against is the New Zealand Knights, funnily enough, because he never got to play against them because they only lasted 2 years. So they folded before he had made his debut. I mean, to have scored against Western and especially Auckland FC, which first of all, no one else has scored against Auckland FC. So there's no one else who could have possibly more than 15 teams scored against. But to have scored against like North Queensland Fury and Gold Coast United, and then still be scoring goals against Western United and Auckland FC takes a very kind of specific career there. So I'm not going to look that stat up because it's too hard to go through everyone who scored. It's be difficult. I think what's his name used to play for the Phoenix striker, and also Fornaroli was on about 12 as well. Barisha was on about 12. Like these guys aren't up there with Kosta Barbarouses scoring against 15 different A-League teams. That is a pretty incredible achievement.
I was just thinking, like, was Kosta Barbarouses the best player on the field? And I kind of think he was, but I don't want to say it with my chest, with my full wairua, because, like, Sakai didn't do anything wrong. Dan Hall didn't really...
Sakai would be my nominee for best player on the pitch.
Right, but like,
he set up both goals as well as being awesome defensively.
Well, there you go. So he's probably the best player on the field. But like, Dan Hall didn't do anything wrong. Nando didn't do anything wrong. I don't think Mai did anything wrong. That's the point I'm getting to about Auckland FC. They are the sum of their parts. They are a team where everyone is playing at a high level, but they're connected in how they do that. And I think the most important detail that I've been tracking with Auckland FC is how they... Because off the top of my head, comparing the two teams, Wellington Phoenix seem very spread out. Auckland FC seem a lot more compact. And I believe their ability to win the ball in the opposition half sets the tone for everything. Because when you're doing it that high up the field, you need to be connected with the men behind you. You need to be connected with the men either side of you. and then you only need to go like 10 meters to get a goal scoring chance. Like I saw the Wellington Phoenix cut Auckland FC apart by passing from their goalie to the opposition goal. They didn't score that chance, but they did cut Auckland FC apart, and they've cut many teams apart this season with their passing structure, their passing system. The thing that goes back to that grown man, but respect to all genders, the grown up football element of Auckland FC, they're just going to get the ball off you and create a chance. Like, it seems more simple, seems more effective, but there's a lot of high quality players who are playing their role in that style, in that system, like the Warriors of 2023, where none of those dudes have to go above and beyond, you know, like Sakai doesn't have to be an absolute maestro. Yes, they lost Verstrada, but Howison did a pretty nice job in the center of midfield. Dan Hall doesn't need to be a dominant beast at centre back because he's got another good centre back right beside him. Like, it doesn't, like, that's the thing about Auckland FC that I love. Unfortunately, Alex Paulson, is it his twin brother or is it just a brother that looks a lot like him?
Older brother, Addin Paulson. He's actually a New Zealand futsal international.
All right, because it did trick me.
Runs in the family.
It did trick me. It did buzz me out. I can't lie. I was buzzing out the whole game because it started with like seeing the port on the stairs, and then I'm seeing Jeff Wilson in the presentation. Then I'm seeing the other Paulson brother right there, and I'm tripping out like, what's going on? This is already the funkiest Kiwi sporting experience I've ever witnessed. Then the football starts. Then the Phoenix fans start to boo Alex Paulson, and Auckland FC are cheering Paulson, and all this crazy shit's happening. Alex Roof is just kicking a bloke on the floor. Like, it was fantastic. But my point about Auckland FC is, yes, Paulson conceded a goal. Unfortunately for him, he has now conceded one goal in his, like, this isn't true, but in his life as a professional goalkeeper, whatever, like, somehow
it feels like it, yeah.
And the goal
Save
he
percentage
conceded
has plummeted from 100% to 95% this season.
The goal he conceded, he could have saved, because he made a decision to go one direction and Kosta went the other direction. I think if Paulson just comes straight out and he makes himself big, I think he can stop that shot from Kosta Barbarouses. But he made an instinctive decision to go this way, and then Kosta Barbarouses, who seems to be scoring a lot of goals with his left boot, but
he's scoring a lot of goals full stop.
No, but he scored last week with his left boot, didn't he? Top of the box.
And I don't know if there's anywhere I can check that for A-League. But
just go to the highlights and watch the highlights. You know, it's not that difficult. I can do it in a jiffy.
Well, I can't check all of his goals. He scored a lot of them. It might well have been.
I don't think he's a left-footed player, but he's scoring goals with his left boot, which is pretty nice for Kosta. But I think Paulson could have saved it, but he might have bit off a bit more than he could chew as far as making a decision early with Kosta coming at him. But my point about Auckland FC is that, yes, Paulson's awesome at goalie. Yes, Dan Hall's an awesome centre-back. Nando's an awesome centre-back. But they are a unit. They are a team where everyone plays their role. They are a team where the system and their collective teamwork and their connection with each other is what makes them the best team in the A-League. And to me, that is most evident when they are defending in the opposition half and they are turning the ball over and they're creating chances. That's what I love about Auckland FC. Respectfully, I also like a bit of Wellington Phoenix. I'm staying down the middle, but we're just talking about how it is. Have you had a quick squiz at Kosta's goal last week?
I have, and it was absolutely a left-footed chance.
Bang.
It was I'm trying to check this one. What are the other ones that popped up? Was his Western United goal, but it buffered, so I couldn't see. But I think that might have been that's a tap in from closer range. No, actually, he sticks his right foot out just across his body.
That's important.
But yeah, last week's was definitely a lefty.
His tap-ins are with the right foot. His shots from the edge of the box are with his left foot. Like, this is Kosta Barbarouses. This might be peak Kosta Barbarouses, if I'm able to speak from an uneducated perspective. Don't really know too much about his Melbourne victory days, but I'm watching Kosta Barbarouses do some amazing shit for the Wellington Phoenix. And I'm also watching Auckland FC do some amazing shit as a football team.
Well, per one of the things you were saying there, you want to hazard a guess which team is winning the most tackles in the opposition half this season?
Obviously, it's Auckland FC because I know my bloody
It's
football.
Auckland FC. It's Auckland FC. They're just, yeah, I think that's exactly the point about them is they are compact, they're structured, and they've just got good mentality about how they play. Like they will wait it out if it takes until stoppage time. They've scored a lot of late goals this season. They'll wait you out until you make a mistake. Or maybe you make a mistake in the first half like the Phoenix did. And I think that goal was less an Isaac Hughes mistake. I think he's just in an awkward position where he probably should have ducked out of the way because I don't think Liam Gillian was behind him, but I don't think Gillian's going to be able to do anything with that cross because it's absolutely slammed across by Sakai. But the point is, it's slammed across, so you got no time to react. And you're always going to, as a defender, you're always going to try to do the more proactive thing. It's like, what can I control? I can control sticking my head on this and trying to clear it. Unfortunately, he was just in a bit of a no-win situation there, maybe. But the mistake was earlier when you see Sutton and Ishige both covering one guy on this thing, and no one tracks the run of Sakai. And you actually see, if you look at it, you'll see Sutton points to Ishige, like points to the space that's being left behind. And I think maybe he just didn't yell it loud enough, or Ishige missed it or whatever, because he doesn't. It was a bit of a timid, just little like flick of the wrist kind of. There you go. Well, I'm over here. You do that guy. You cut the inside channel, and he didn't. They both went out wide, and Sakai just ran unobstructed into the area to the byline. So I think that was more where the mistake came from. But that's a bit of a rare thing for the Phoenix, and it's also a rare thing to see them conceding from a set piece, as they did later on. Sutton and Kolakovsky, neither of them could get a header up against Peinecker, which, yeah, understandable. Peinecker's huge, but also, yeah, at least got to get up there and challenge and make it tough for him. And neither of them really did that, which is out of character. And I also thought this is what I was saying before about the body language. I thought the Phoenix looked really frustrated in that game. They had gotten 5 yellow cards combined in 5 games. In this game, they got 5 yellow cards alone. Like just in this game, they matched their yellow card total from the entire rest of the season in this lone game, and that doesn't even include the yellow card that Italiano got on the sideline as well. He said afterwards he got booked for putting a water bottle down, which I don't think that was the reason, but I also don't know what he did. Sometimes they just give the card to the coach because he like represents the technical area. It might have been someone else, but
well, we all know.
Who knows?
But
the point is,
let's not pretend.
Well, he's yelling at stuff.
Yeah.
He's barking away. Yeah, whatever. But even like Kosta Barbarouses, you could see him. He looked frustrated, more frustrated than usual. And Alex Rufer looked really frustrated at times. And I got the feeling they were part of this frustration is because they couldn't do entirely what they wanted. Like the plan, it's not like the plan wasn't working. Chiefy said afterwards he felt like they executed things pretty well. It's just they conceded a couple uncharacteristic goals, and that changes the course of the game. And allowed Auckland FC to play to their strengths by just managing things and not having to take crazy risks along the way. And yeah, it looked uncharacteristic from the Phoenix to get that emotionally worked up. They are quite a process-driven team. You don't normally see them getting antsy, getting kind of a little bit wild out there on the football pitch. But I think you got that in this game. And I think maybe they let the emotion of the occasion affect them a lot more than Auckland FC. Although I do think Auckland FC, after they scored that second goal, they started coasting a little bit and let the Phoenix back into the game. And Chiefy did say he felt if the game went 5 minutes longer, they would have got an equalizer. I don't know if I'd guarantee a 5-minute break, but I do think they were starting to take more control. And you were in the last sort of 10 minutes after Costa scored, especially starting to see a lot more Marco Rojas touches. So that's the thing. Like Auckland FC feel like a fully formed team. The Phoenix, they still feel, like I've said a few times, they still feel like a team that's building towards something. Like they're not the final product. They haven't been able to get their best guys on the pitch all together for long enough so far. And they're scratching the surface. There's more to come, but yeah, I don't think they handled that occasion all that well, and that probably had a fair bit to do with how the outcome went. But I also think that is a credit to Auckland FC, because not only did they handle it very well, they handled it in a way that forced Wellington Phoenix to react in an uncharacteristic way themselves. So that was brought on by how good, how structured, how little Auckland FC gave the Wellington Phoenix to work with. And there were still moments within that. Like you said, there were passing moves where they did cut Auckland FC up a little bit. But the only goal they conceded was very much a sort of individual thing of Tommy Smith was out there and just didn't have the pace to keep up kind of thing. So there's stuff to work with for Wellington Phoenix, but bottom line, Auckland FC have won both of these games. They are the better team right now. That doesn't happen accidentally, and they've won them by playing the way that they like to play as well. They haven't had to adapt or rely on any freak circumstances. These two results have both been very consistent with the way they've won all of their other games, because they've won all of their other games.
There were a couple of ifs in there, and it did remind me, because there's a saying like if was a fifth, then I'd be, super drunk. But I've kind of repurposed it for if was a spliff, then I'll be floating on a cloud, So I do want to highlight that.
I think that actually works better. So
yeah, it does. We'll save the Flying Kiwis. Like, you can check out the Flying Kiwis yarn on our website, where Chris Wood scored another goal, as he does. Big moment for thenichecache as well in Italy. India Page Riley scored a goal for Crystal Palace, and Elijah Just going, I think he scored on his right foot this week, doing a bit of Kosta Barbarouses razzle dazzle as well. So if you do love your overseas footballers representing Aotearoa, make sure you're tapped into the deep dive on our website, thenichecache.com. But I've made an executive decision to stop talking football, because we do need to chat some cricket. We do need to talk about some Blackcaps.
Let's get to the sad stuff, yeah.
I mean, we were here last week talking about the Blackcaps being disgusting. And then they lost the second test.
Well, and before they lost the second test, which you did say earlier, but before they did that, they named an unchanged 11. After we spent a lot of time on our podcast last week talking about what changes they might make, they made none, which, again, to echo your earlier point, is exactly what they did in Sri Lanka, where they had a close-ish, competitive, but ultimately second-best kind of performance in the first test against Sri Lanka to lose, named an unchanged 11, and were absolutely pathetic in the second test. It was like a 500-run first innings deficit or something. What did they do here? I wouldn't say they were absolutely pathetic in terms of one game to the next, but that's only because the bar they set in the first test against England was also quite low, so there wasn't that much further to go. So I think the performances were fairly similar between first test and second test. Second test was worse, though. But yeah, the repeated thing of, let's just pick the same team, let's do exactly the same thing again, and see if it works differently against a team that's not going to change how they play, and have just absolutely sort of bulldozed us in the first test. Well, maybe we won't get bulldozed the second time, except you did get bulldozed again, and it was kind of worse, and it was even worse than how much worse it was for the fact that they did this a couple months ago, and it was the same thing.
The Blackcaps made more changes test to test in India than they have done in a losing series in Sri Lanka and New Zealand against England. That makes absolutely no sense, but you can take the reins here. You got any questions? You want to just go off on anything, hit me up, because I'm obviously ready to go on any angle, but I'm curious, you can just throw things at me. There will be changes. There will be a change.
The miracle of birth.
For the third test, Devon Conway, I'm going to say he was dropped. He's been dropped for the third test. And we've talked about this for a while. Devon Conway, casual contract extraordinaire, he should not be in the test team. He probably shouldn't have got a casual contract, because the only other bloke with a casual contract is Kane Williamson. So I think there's we might not see Devon Conway for a while, because after this test series, he's probably just going to go play T20 cricket, and that might be the end of Devon Conway. And I will say, before I let you just take the test discussion wherever you want to go. Well, I've got 2 points. Firstly, I think the White Ferns should be petrified. I think New Zealand cricket should be petrified about what is coming with the White Ferns. Credit to the Blackcaps, they won 3-0 in India. Credit to the White Ferns, they won the T20 World Cup. Before that, both teams were stinking it up. The Blackcaps sucked at the T20 World Cup. The Blackcaps were rolled in Sri Lanka. The Blackcaps were rolled by Australia and New Zealand. Blackcaps were losing tests in New Zealand every summer. Who cares about the White Ferns' losing streak? They were 2-13 in T20s. They lost a T20 series to Pakistan in New Zealand last summer. Both teams were stinking it up, and then they had a moment of glory. Credit to them for the moment of glory. Since then, the Blackcaps have sucked, and the White Ferns are now going to play Australia, who seem to be unstoppable. They are an unstoppable cricketing force, the Australian women's cricket team. Sure, they had a bad T20 World Cup. They didn't quite get as far as they wanted to, but I think they're going to come to New Zealand and smash the White Ferns. And I think it's going to be a pretty hefty dose of reality for New Zealand cricket after they were big up in themselves, after I was big up in them as well. So stay tuned. But there's this ongoing storyline in New Zealand cricket where the young players are still really good. In Plunket Shield, the first few days of Plunket Shield, because I dropped this in the newsletter yesterday, Will Clark, 23 years old, 5 wickets, 100 for CD. Curtis Heafy, he's 21 years old, he hit a 63. Matt Fisher's 25 years, he took 4 wickets. Zach Fox is 22 years, already playing for the Blackcaps, he took 5 wickets. Cameron Paul's 19 years old, he took 3 wickets. Reece Mariu's 22 years old, he just hit his 3rd consecutive whatever, 87 runs. Mitch Hay, 24 years old, he's already played for the Blackcaps, 81 runs. Luke Georgeson's 25 years old, he took 3 wickets, but he's also not out on 139. Max Chu is 23 or 24 years old, he hit 130 for Otago as well. Addy Ashok, 22 years old, took 4 wickets. Tim Robinson's currently 30 not out. Like, these young cricketers in Aotearoa are really, really good. Shout out to the veterans as well. Sean Sollier's scoring a lot of runs. G. Raval's scoring runs. Michael Bracewell, Peter Younghusband taking wickets. Nick Kelly's scoring runs. But I do want to hammer home this idea that the youngsters are really good at cricket. And that was evident for the Blackcaps. Nathan Smith, to be honest, he just looks like one of the best players in the team. Sure, he didn't take a lot of wickets. Sure, he didn't score a lot of runs. Sure, his stats don't necessarily look great because England are smashing him. But Nathan Smith looks like an international cricketer. He looks like one of the best players in the team. Willow Walk and Rachin Ravindra are some of the best players in the team. Glenn Phillips is one of the best players in the team. There was a stage in that test of the Basin Reserve where England are just cruising along. Who are the blokes who keep showing up with the ball? Who are the blokes who keep steaming in with the ball? It's Will O'Rourke and Nathan Smith. Who's the bloke who batted like his life depended on it for a moment there in the test? It's Will O'Rourke. Who's the bloke who's flying around like an absolute freak doing his best Glenn Phillips imitation? It's Nathan Smith. Like, the new players are awesome. The young players are awesome, but that's not just a Blackcaps thing. That is also crystal clear in the Plunket Shield. You can take this discussion wherever you want to go. Maybe got some questions, maybe some hot takes, but you're up.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm no longer dealing with the kind of cognitive dissonance of how did they do that in India and this in England and also that in Sri Lanka beforehand, but specifically from India to this England series, like how did that happen? Like, well, the more I think about it, that India series was low scoring and the Blackcaps have a lot of batters who are out of form. Well, your out of form batters aren't such a weakness if there's not so many runs in the test matches, right? Like, they bowled India up for 46 in the first innings of that series and set a tone from there. So the damage done by those batters being bad is not so much compared to a very high scoring series against England and what we had here, where, like, you look at the recent score. I remember we were going through the recent scores at Hagley Oval, and how no one was really scoring 350 in those games in the last few years. Well, England were pushing 500. They had 499 in one of those innings. Like, that's high scoring cricket, and it's fast scoring cricket as well. But that's sort of irrelevant in this point. It doesn't matter how quickly they scored their runs. The fact is they scored them runs. And also, who was taking all the wickets in India were all the spinners. So if you've got out of form or ineffective seam bowlers, one in particular, but in general, we'll say, well, because these guys aren't. Will O'Rourke's not taking a heap of wickets against England right now. Matt Henry's getting a few, but not a heap of wicket against England. England are putting together partnerships. Nathan Smith's has bowled well, but struggled to get wickets at times, except for his run-out ability, because that was clutch. That was. I don't even think people gave him enough credit for how good that was, let alone the fact that this is your one opportunity you're going to be able to do this. It's Harry Brook who's there, and he's on like 150, and he averages 100 against this country. Like, he's ripping us to pieces, and this is your one moment. You've been tearing into the breeze as well a lot of that time in the basin, and like follow through, hurls it down, hits the stumps, one-handed, outstanding bit of work there. But it wasn't a wicket with the ball necessarily. Well, in India, seamers weren't taking a heap of wickets with the ball there either. They were getting a few. Matt Henry and Will O'Rourke certainly had their moments. But it was like 2/3 of the wickets almost were taken by spinners. Well, we're not in a situation where spin bowling is much of a factor. Glenn Phillips took more wickets in India than Will O'Rourke did. And that's not been the case in the series in England. So it's like the things that worked well for them in India don't translate to the series against England. And the things that have been terrible for them against England were kind of like the weaknesses they've shown against England were kind of shielded against India as well. So it actually seems like, it makes sense how the same team could have such different things, because you actually, it just like like I said, the strengths are exaggerated in one thing and don't apply to the other. The weaknesses are exaggerated in one and didn't apply to the other. It's actually makes perfect sense when you work it out that way.
But that's only if you if you start the timeline before India. If you take
the Sri Lanka one makes it tricky because that was also a spinnier one.
No, but this is the thing I think a lot of people are overlooking with the Blackcaps is the timeline goes back 5 years. Not 5 years, maybe 3 years.
Three and a half. Go back to the Test Championship final, basically.
You go to the start of 2022, which is only 2 years. That's when they started losing tests in New Zealand. And from there, we have been building towards this moment. Players have been out of form for 2 years. Different captains have been losing tests. There is no home advantage in New Zealand. We were swept by England in 2022. Like, none of the issues the Blackcaps are facing right now are new. That's the most interesting thing. Like, yes, if you compare this with India, you can kind of sum it up nicely, and I imagine that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to make sense of what we are processing.
Well, yeah, it's less from a perspective of how does a great team suddenly do terribly against England. It's more like, how does this team that has been kind of bad for a while in Test cricket, how did they do so well against India? Yes. Like, that was the anomaly series.
Yes. So once again, what we saw in India was completely different to what we saw in Sri Lanka, and it was completely different when the Blackcaps were rolled 2-0 by Australia at the end of last summer. Like, the only positives we have here are beating South Africa B team last summer and maybe a Test series win over Sri Lanka and New Zealand. So yes, any other bits and pieces?
Well, that does play up to what I think is the main theme of this, which is this is very much a team in transition. And like, Tim Southee's about to play his last Test match, which is sort of why I'm like, the series is gone and he's been one of our legendary players. I'm like, well, he maybe should have been dropped last Test, but I don't really see why you should drop him this Test. Like, what else are you playing for? You're not going to make the World Test Championship final. You're not going to win the series against England. I guess you could try win a game against England and break the losing streak.
They have generated a very awkward moment. Like, they can't drop Tim Southee. So, like, No one can suggest they should drop Tim Southee because they can't and they won't.
Yeah, because if you were going to, you should have done it by now.
Yes, and that's the issue.
So that doesn't make sense to do it now, but then you're putting him in a situation where he's playing his farewell tour and everyone is like, yeah, good, fuck off, get out of here. Which is rough because
But it's not different to Devon Conway. It's not different to Henry Nichols. It's not different to Tom Latham. Like, this extended show of faith has been happening for a couple years now. So again, things we're seeing for the Blackcaps in this test series are not new.
Yeah.
We were talking about Devon Conway's form slump last summer. This is currently Tom Latham's worst year of test batting. And it didn't start in the last 2 tests. Right?
And those are the openers. So,
and all the issues were evident in the T20 World Cup. So we're working across different time frames, or we're working across a long time frame. We're working across different formats. We're working across different captains. That's the interesting part. That's the crux of it. But again, you want to defend Tim Southee, so go ahead.
Well, I'm not defending him. I'm just saying Tim Southee is not the I have done a lot of defending Tim Southee. I'll be fair over recent times, but the thing is, when you're saying, well, he didn't take any wickets this series, but he bowled all right. There's a little bit of zip there. You can say that for one series. When you start to be in the 5th series in a row of saying that, it's too much. There comes a point where even the fervent supporters have to step back and say, yeah, it's not working though. And unfortunately, he's not going to get to his 400 wickets mark because. It's a shame. He probably deserved to hit that milestone, but also he's not going to hit the milestone because of his performances. So unfortunately, that's how it goes. He's not going to keep his average under 30, I don't think either. And he's more likely of all the milestones. He's more likely to hit 5 sixes in this test match and get to 100 sixes, but kind of don't think that'll happen either. That's a shame, but it's also he's not the only out of form player in the team. And when the team's selection policy seems to be to let players have the longest stroke possible, I really don't see why people would get stressed out over the guy who is only going to play one more test match, who's already said, I'm retiring after this. It's like that problem's solved. Next time they play test cricket, Tim Southee won't be there to take 1 for 60 of 15 overs or whatever he's getting up to these days. Like that's done. That's finished. But it's not hard to imagine Devon Conway coming straight back into the team for the next series. It's not hard to see Tom Blundell hanging around. It's not hard to see whoever else has been struggling for form. Tom Latham's been struggling for form. Even, frankly, Rachin Ravindra has been struggling for form. Where are we here?
It's 3 tests for Ravindra, 3 or 4 tests. It's very different for Ravindra than Tom Latham, and Blundell's got a score. Like, Blundell's not in danger. Blundell's all good. He fixed it. He fought for his spot, sure, when it didn't really matter. But there are...
But at least he did it at some point. No one else has.
Yeah. Like, Ravindra's not scoring runs right now, but he's a young player learning about test cricket. Those ups and downs are going to come and go. The thing that I was thinking about is I believe some of these awkward spots could have been just fixed if you just drop them earlier and make them fight for their spot. Like, what's wrong?
I agree. Yeah.
Like, Tim Southee's not bowling so well. Great, go dominate Plunkett Shield and earn your way back into the team. That seems like more respect than selecting him just to do nothing. Like, it seems more disrespectful to just select you while you stink than giving you the opportunity. Giving you the opportunity to fight your way back into the team. What has Devon Conway done compared to Tim Southee to earn that type of faith? Nothing. So then definitely Devon Conway, take some time in Plunkett Shield to earn your spot in the team. That's probably the biggest issue, is some of these dudes haven't earned their spot in the team. Tom Blundell, When he went back to Wellington, he scored a 60 in the Plunkett Shield. Now, that was just, they played one game just because they needed to keep their reps up after the tour of India. He wasn't dropped and put back in Plunkett Shield, but at least he did something in Plunkett Shield outside of the Blackcaps. I believe there's enough depth in New Zealand cricket to do this. What was wrong with saying to Devon Conway, mate, you need some runs, you need some confidence, just go back and earn your way into the team because we got Will Young right here. What's Mark Chapman done to earn his place in the Blackcaps squad? Hit a 200. So there's these situations, like obviously the youngsters, they need to score a lot of runs, they need to take a lot of wickets, which they're doing. Will O'Rourke, Nathan Smith, Rachin Ravindra, Glenn Phillips, Zach Folks, Mitch Hayes, the next wicketkeeper, he's scoring runs. Like all these dudes are stacking up runs and wickets. The Will Young, Mark Chapman types, they need to score runs to stay in the mix. But then there's players who have been in the first 11 who have been given too much time when I believe a stronger, more powerful position would have been to drop them and make them play their way back into the team. Because if Tim Southee was really wanting to continue his test career, he would have snared lots of wickets for Northern Districts and played his way back into the team. Instead, he just kind of fizzles out into oblivion. And sure, he's going to have the lovely moment at Seddon Park. Does anyone care? Because we're getting smoked. We're getting rolled up and smoked with the if is a spliff.
Yeah, and even then, like, I understand how Tim Southee, having played 100+ test matches, gets a little bit more leeway. I don't understand how Devon Conway gets the same leeway. It's the same. It's like there's, where are we? Devon Conway scored double century on debut, right? Scored 300s in his first 9 innings. He's batted 42 times in test match cricket since then and has 1 additional century. So 300 to 9 innings, 142 innings since is not good. It's not good opening battership. And unfortunately, he doesn't even have the longest streak since his last test century in the Blackcaps team. You want to guess who that would be? Of the top 7 plus Will Young.
I'm going to say it is the current captain who they can't drop because he's the captain.
That'd be correct. Tom Latham has gone 36 innings since his last Test 100, which is more than Will Young and Glenn Phillips, who have never scored Test 100s. Will Young hasn't scored a Test 100, and yet he's still had fewer innings since, well, I can't say since his last 100, but fewer innings since leading up to his next 100, we'll say, because I'm sure he'll get one at some point. Maybe he'll get one in this test match and change some things. At least the opening partnership is going to get broken up, because when you got Tom Latham out of form, you got Devon Conway out of form, you get a situation where the Blackcaps in test match cricket in 2024 had 22 innings with the bat, and on 16 occasions, the first wicket's fallen for fewer than 20 runs. They've only had 2 50-plus run partnerships. There was a brief, the Aussie series, it was Latham and Young. All the other series have been Conway and Latham. Conway and Latham had a 63-run stand in the first innings of the first test in Sri Lanka and a 67-run stand in response to the 46 all-out in India to start that. Those are the biggest partnerships this year. And there's been a lot of opportunities that have not, oh man, like, because they keep talking about this on the commentary, like Kane Williamson's basically an opener now because he's having to come in at 1 for 9 every innings or whatever. I'm like, well, no, that's a number 3's job. You might be in the first over, you might be in the 30th over or the 100th over. Like, you're not an opener unless you're walking out there at 0 for 0. But the point remains that that is not a situation you want to put your best batter in. And it's also because Williamson's getting out there early, and it's not like one of those two is out. It's not like Conway's getting out cheap and then Latham's going on to score big scores. Like, they're both getting out pretty cheaply. They're both getting low scores, which actually means Ravindra is also coming in very early. And Rachi Ravindra is not really the guy you want facing the swinging ball because he keeps swinging at the swinging ball and getting himself out. He also is swinging at the short balls and swinging at quite a lot at the moment and getting himself out in a few different ways. But he actually has he's got the most recent 100 of everyone pre-Blundell's 100 because he did get a century in India. So he at least has some more recent form in his, even though he's got, I think, 5 of his last 7 innings have been dismissed in single figures, he at least has done it recently. He's done it this year. Can't say that for Latham, can't say that for Conway, and it's just sitting like, it's one thing to have this many out of form players, but when your 2 openers are both struggling and one of your opening bowlers is struggling, it's like they get off to a bad start in every single innings.
Nicely put.
Yeah, well.
The bonus podcast, I think we're going to talk a lot of Plunket Shield because I don't really want to talk much more Blackcaps, so we'll be going deep into Plunket Shield. Maybe some A-League preview action, any news that pops up we might discuss, and I think we might get into your Flying Kiwi stuff on Thursday, just update some of the best Kiwi footballers around the world. Otherwise, we appreciate your eardrums and eyeballs. We'll be working hard to do our thing with Aotearoa sporting information. Big up yourself. Love yourself. Kia kaha. Stay beautiful. Chur.